Hi there, this is Joe Vargas from Behind the Badge. Let's face it, there's a lot of issues law enforcement has had to deal with the past few years. But one of those hot button issues has been the way police deal with those persons who are considered homeless. And it's a problem that's not just restricted to one city or state, it's a nationwide issue. Today we're going to be talking with Anaheim Police Chief Jorge Cisneros, and also with Jessica Bruce from the Anaheim Community Care Response Team. They formed a new partnership that will hopefully deliver a more effective service model when it comes to dealing with homeless persons. So let's go ahead and join them in a conversation today. Hi there, here with Joe Vargas from Behind the Badge. We're going to be approaching a subject today that impacts just about every major and minor city in the United States today, and increasingly over the years has become a police problem. And it isn't just a police problem, as we're going to find out, but it's a community problem as well. And that's the issue of homelessness. How it impacts communities is evident. For those of you listening, I would gather the majority of you at one point or another have some sort of homeless issue going on, whether it's at your city parks or just as you drive down the streets. How do we deal with a problem that makes people feel less secure in their communities, but at the same time has to be dealt with in a way that is compassionate and understanding of the difficulties that people that are going through homelessness are going through? And we see this all the time. It seems that every time the police try to do something, they're met with public outcry about not being compassionate and understanding. And then if they don't do anything, you've got the other half of the public that is going, our parks are less safe and our streets are less safe, and my children can't even use the playground because the police are refusing to do something. But the reason we're here today specifically, and I'll let my guests introduce themselves right now, is because the city of Anaheim is, for the county of Orange at least, taking an innovative step and a different approach to dealing with the issue of homelessness in the city and the area at wide. And I got to applaud them, because it does involve some risk. It does involve a different direction than most people are used to. And go ahead. I got the Chief of Police here. If you want to introduce yourself, Chief Cisneros.
All right. Well, thank you, John and Cindy, for this great opportunity. My name is Jorge Cisneros. I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Anaheim. And I want to thank you for doing this podcast today because I think it's an extremely important topic.
Good morning. My name is Jessica Bruce, and I am the Chief Program Officer with CityNet. And we are the partnering agency with the City of Anaheim that has created this new program, the Community Care Response Team.
Okay. And also with me, as I enjoy having my podcast, is my partner, Cindy Aurora. And she'll also be helping us out today.
Hi there.
Okay. So, we've had this intro. We've talked about homelessness and the challenges. And I'd like to start with the Chief. Chief, what got us to where we are today, where we're taking this much different approach than most cities are doing?
Yeah, so just like many, just throughout the world in 2020, we had a change in life with this pandemic that none of us have really dealt with before for this time, at least in our generation. So we got the pandemic, and then we had the unfortunate incident that occurred in Minneapolis. And those two things, followed by the financial impact from the pandemic, were three things that not only the city of Anaheim was dealing with, but also all other communities throughout this country. Obviously, we were a little bit more impacted than most other communities because about 40% of our general fund dollars do come from tourism. And so while all of this was occurring, with the unfortunate incident that happened in Minneapolis, we were talking about protest, reform, and defund in regards to policing. And we had to really address those things. One of the great things was the city of Anaheim had numerous protests, but they were mostly all peaceful, a majority of them. I think we only had one incident where we had to actually use a little bit of force. So we had really great individuals in our community that came out for their right to speak up on what they believe were issues in our community. We then had the reform issues that they were talking about. And one of the great things about the Anaheim Police Department was we were ahead of the curveball. And I can't take all that credit. I think its previous chiefs that were here also have to take some credit in the leadership. And the men and women that wear this uniform have done a great job So really, reform was not something that we really had to address, for the exception of the carotid. The carotid had been a tool that we had used for numerous years, and we had documentation that it was used appropriately and it was effective. But we, following the reforms and with the governor moving, not allowing for it to be used, we went ahead and removed it from one of our policies and procedures. Then was the defund the police department, and that was interesting. I think the defund can be defined numerous ways by different people. But reality was, I think many people just wanted to see a different direction as to how to deal with some of these things. And so when that came across, it was my opportunity, I thought, that to reimagine policing and how we best serve our community. And so there were three things that I looked at. I looked at training of our employees, I looked at accreditation, and I looked at really stop from going to calls that had no criminal nexus or a safety concern. In particular, our homeless calls that we were receiving, numerous of them had no criminal nexus or safety concern. So that's how we started to embark in this, and I sent out a unit out to look at different programs throughout this country. We looked, I think, at New York, Denver, Eugene, Oregon, Cahoots program that had really started some of this. And we took the best things from those. We obviously learned from them. And we kind of crafted something that we thought could be beneficial for our city, for our community, that could best wrap around the services that the city had provided. As many of you know, we had already provided our own shelter places. But in order to get those beds filled, we really needed to communicate in the field. And that had been something that the police department had been done for numerous years. Not only here in the city of Anaheim, but throughout our country. Because of our 24/7, 365 days a year, this responsibility was put on police departments. And police departments throughout numerous communities went ahead and trained some of their employees on how to address those individuals who were going through trauma in regards to homelessness, and some of those individuals with mental illness or drug addiction. And so we have done a great job, but we believe that there are individuals, and we reached out to CityNet, a great organization that we have a great working relationship, and this is their vocation. This is their lifelong vocation, and why would we not put those individuals in front to serve those individuals in need? So that's really how it started. I know it's a little bit long-winded, but I'll stop there, and maybe there's another question.
Well, you touched on it, and that is that the police department has always answered the phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And people call because we pick up the phone. And they expect a response. But in many ways, it's intuitive just to see that a person with a uniform and a gun may not be the right responder that you need. It just seems to me, in my experience, that a lot of these people have had negative contacts with the police, and that's not the best way to open a door. Are these guys going to arrest me, or how am I going to be receptive? I'm going to be to what's going on. Now, the history of CityNet is another story in and of itself. How you came to be formed, and it's almost like the right place at the right time with dealing with a significant issue. Can you give us a little bit of background on what CityNet is all about?
Yes, CityNet has been serving and providing homeless services in the city of Anaheim since 2014. So back in 2014, our executive director and vice president, Brad Fieldhouse and Matt Bates, met with the city and was talking with them about their homeless needs. So they had the HOT team out and they were responding, but the city knew they needed to have someone with a social work background out to talk with the individuals and build that rapport so the clients would be open to services. So we started in 2014 with a small team out, a few days a week. We'd go out at nighttime with the HLOs to engage homeless neighbors and connect them to resources and shelter. So we started out very small, and throughout the years, as the homeless issue has grown and increased in the city of Anaheim, we've expanded our services and our team. So before CCRT came to fruition, we were in the city 5 days a week with 2 teams, and it wasn't enough. Our phone line alone, CityNet has a hotline for homeless neighbors to call and reach out to be connected to services, and we were receiving over 600 calls a month just from people in the city of Anaheim. So we knew that our reach was limited with our small team. So, fast forward to where we're at now, the city recognized that, services need to be offered and available to homeless neighbors at a much larger, bigger time frame during the day and throughout the week. So that's when we came to the city and said, you know what, if we really want to impact homeless services and make an impact in the city of Anaheim, we need to be available to the community, on a regular basis. So now we are a team that is out in the community 7 days a week, 14 hours a day. Our teams can go we started out in the morning with 3 teams, our peak of the day is with 6 teams, and then we lower down back to a smaller team during the evening time. But this gives us the bandwidth to be able to respond to all of the avenues of the calls that are coming in for service, including the new avenue of the Anaheim Police Department dispatch, being able to contact our dispatch team and dispatch us to calls for service for nonviolent homeless needs. So a community member isn't driving down the street, they see a homeless individual that looks like they're in distress. They call Anaheim Police Department. The police department is able to recognize that it's a call just for homelessness and not a violent or an emergency call, and they're able to dispatch that call to CityNet, and we're able to be in the city and responsive within a 15-minute window to sit down and talk with that homeless individual, evaluate what's going on, and and help them and give them the resources that are appropriate for them at that time.
So that's a big deal. The fact that you're on the same radio frequency, pretty much as the police department.
Not the same radio frequency, but we are the next avenue for those calls coming in from the community.
Okay.
Is this the first time they've had anything like this? It's such a unique part of the service.
It is a very unique. So this is the first time that we've worked with the city where they were able to, their dispatch was able to evaluate the calls that were coming in that were, addressing homeless issues or mental health issues, and they were able to divert the calls from the police to an organization that can go out and address these issues and take the time and the resources in the community to be able to work with that individual and resolve their situation.
And Chief, so how many calls are we looking at that you guys were going out to?
So what I did was for this first year, obviously after the first 2 months, I looked at our previous year, 2020, and so that was right before the pandemic hit, and so we were averaging about 2,000 calls that we were responding to on a monthly basis. With now looking at that data and then comparing it to 2021 versus January and February, we saw a reduction of 25%. So currently, right now, CityNet, at least from our perspective, is taking 1,000 of those 4,000 calls that are going directly to CityNet and really providing that service. So it's really been a good beginning. One of the things I always tell people is I haven't turned the faucet on all the way yet. Mm-hmm. We want to make sure that this program gets its legs, and obviously any new program is going to have some bumps in the road. So we definitely know that we're working through those things. Better communication at times is going to be something that we'll really look at. And so I think that's really extremely important, that this is just the beginning. It's a pilot program. We're looking to hopefully make this a year-long project so that we can show the benefits of this. I think the very first 2 months, and I think I just got the third month. I haven't looked at it yet, but I will definitely look at that. And I think we're going to be able to show the first quarter as to how really well this is working. At the end of the day, it's not only about the calls that are not coming to the police department, right? It's also about the services that we're providing these unfortunate individuals that they're going through. So I look at it from the perspective of and they don't go in any order, but for this to be successful from my point of view, it needs to address 3 things. It's got to first and foremost address the individual that is in dire need at that time and providing that service. And as you just heard here today, they're responding in 15 minutes. That's quicker than we usually on average respond to those, because we have to prioritize our calls because we get over almost 200,000 calls a year that we respond to. So that's one component. The other component is that unfortunately at times individuals who are homeless and who may also have a mental illness and or a drug addiction impact the quality of life of our residents, visitors, and businesses. And so we have to also look at it from that perspective. Is it benefiting those individuals also? And finally, it's obviously to be able to use our resources, which the citizens of this, of this city have wanted us to address the issue of crime and also the engagement piece with our community by removing ourselves from at least 25% of those calls. That gives us a little bit more time to engage with our community and to solve crime in our community with, that impacts our community, I should say.
Well, you bring up a good point, is that is when issues of homeless behavior, that is that behavior which could be threatening or endangering, the police are still the primary responding agency.
Yes, yeah, we definitely understand that. As I stated, in the first 2 months, we've still responded to approximately 3,000 calls. And that's based off of our current process where we're looking at things such as, is there a criminal nexus or is there a safety concern? And again, we want to make sure this program works, we want to make sure we provide the right service. And so we're still responding to a significant portion of those. Again, as we continue to move this program forward, I think we can adjust it a little bit, because I think we're still responding to certain calls that we're just being precautious. And again, as I said, we didn't want to turn on the faucet all the way. And when something's new, we want to make sure that it works to the best of the capabilities and just start it off a little bit slower.
What does it look like when the police respond to a call versus when CCRT does? Like, what is it like? Where does the middleman get cut out? Like, maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
So from my perspective, it's a very great question. I'm going to try to answer to the best of my abilities, because first we have a HOT team. So a HOT team is our homeless outreach team. And so they have had the training and experience, and they deal with this on a daily basis. And so if it is a long-term issue, we will usually send that call to the HOT team to find solutions that can be long-term. But they only work X amount of hours. It's one team, and one team usually works 40 hours, and there's definitely more than 40 hours in a week. So then after that, it goes to our patrol team. All of our individuals understand that when we get to a call, our job is to determine if there is probable cause for us to make an arrest, or if there is another way of dealing with the issue at hand. So one of the things about policing that got me into policing was the different hats that we wear. And when I started, and I'm kind of in Joe's land, I'm as you can see, my stars on my sleeve. I've been over 30 years in policing. When I started, homelessness was something that we at times had to address. But today, in today's world, and the men and women that put this uniform on and our professional staff have to deal with this issue now more on a daily basis than maybe when I was a police officer. So it has become more prevalent in our society and the calls that we go to. And so I think what we're doing here today is a little bit different. But I think it's the right way to address those three components I talked about, which is, let's make sure that these individuals get the right people at the right time to provide them those services that they need. Also help our community with our quality of life issues that possibly at times, some of these homeless actions do cause quality of life issues for our residents, visitors, and businesses. And then finally be able to provide better service from the police department and engage with our community by all of that work being pushed to a better individual who has a lifelong advocacy and vocation that they're doing. So I'm hoping for a win-win.
But when your HOT team is working, do they would call CityNet anyway, right?
So again, what it starts off with is, as has been explained, is that the calls that come in, we triage them and determine, okay, does this need a response from the police department, or does it need from CCRT? Again, at times, we are still going to work with CityNet. Sometimes working together, going into a camp together, possibly where there's X amount of people, may be the best way to address that issue. So we are really open. Again, we have some rules, some guidelines, but I think we also have to be open to at times that we need to still continue to work together and deal with certain issues. Sometimes you may need the police department to go into an area, let's give a trespassing area, to help because maybe there's some safety concerns. But once we get there and we approach, I think it's also good to bring in CCRT right behind us and then try to provide those services and so forth. And so I think just like Joe said, at times the uniform can be a little intimidating, and that's not what we want. We want to make sure these individuals get the services that they require. We're there just to make sure that there's a safe environment. And for those individuals that may not want to get those services, then it's our job to inform them of the possible violations, and move forward so that they don't create those violations again, or else, we have to take those matters into our own hands at that time.
Okay.
For the CCR team, can you walk us through what a response looks like from them? As they come out and they engage these people, what is it they're hoping to accomplish when they get to these individuals?
Good question. So really, when we go out and engage a homeless individual, the first question or first thing we always want to offer is shelter. We want to end their episode of homelessness as quickly as possible, and getting them connected to the shelter system is the fastest way. But that's not always the appropriate answer or what they want when we come out. So we've got to be ready to talk to them about what their long-term goals are. And so when we come out, we talk to them about accessing the shelter system and getting into the continuum of care and connected to services long term through the county, and what's a possibility if they go through that route. But a lot of times the client says, I'm okay. I want housing, but I don't want to access the shelter system. I'd like to access housing from the streets. So that's when our team has to build that relationship with that individual and start working on a housing plan that will get them to where they want to eventually end. So that can be like working with them to do the VI SPDAT, which is what gets them connected to the county's coordinated entry system to be put on a list for housing. It could be getting their ID, their birth certificate, all of those documents that are needed when you're starting to apply for housing. So we have two avenues. First, it's always, would you like to access shelter? Because that's an easy and quick, win for the client and for us. We can get them to shelter and get them to a safe place where they can have a case manager on site. Or the other option is where they will work with us, we'll work with them from the streets, where we'll come back every week or a couple times a week and meet with them and start progressing them towards a long-term housing plan with the goal of, getting connected to some opportunity within the county.
You've been doing this for a while now, and it seems one of the best avenues of sharing with people how things work is, do you have any stories of success without naming any names or anything about, taking a person from point A all the way, from here to there, really?
Yes, I definitely do. So, we've been providing homeless services in the city, in the county of Orange since 2013. And so lots of great success stories on for clients. So, from the one story is a client that I had that was living in her vehicle. She struggled with mental health. She had multiple animals with her. Not all dogs and cats, just leave it at that. And she did not want to access the shelter system. So our team, we met her the first time when we were out with PD, and she didn't want to talk to us. So then we were able to go back and engage that client and meet with them, and just check in, bring a bottle of water, bring a food pack, build that rapport with that client. And that takes a lot of time. So from there, the client started to open up and would have conversations with us, and we'd start to work on that housing plan. Hey, do you have your ID? Do you have your birth certificate? Can we do this evaluation to try to get you connected to a voucher within the county? So building that rapport and that time and that trust, it takes a lot of time. But with those individuals, we know that it's not going to be a quick fix. It can be anywhere from 90 days to 6 months to sometimes, years that it's going to take them to get attached to a housing opportunity from the streets. But being able to walk with that person and keep in contact with them and make sure they're safe on a weekly basis and make sure that they have their needs being met from the streets and walk with them until they get into housing is one of the most rewarding walks that one of our case managers can take with a client.
Two questions. What was the animals? And then two, what have you found are some of the reasons why people end up on the streets? I mean, there's got to be maybe like top four, or just what have you found?
Yeah, it really, so the animals, so it was 2 dogs and a duck.
Okay. I knew
That's
it.
my favorite story. That was fun. But you know what? They're all housed and happy now, so it's all great. It all ended well. I'm sorry, what was the other question?
It was, what are some of the reasons
why somebody becomes homeless? I think what we see in Orange County, the cost of living is so expensive to be able to maintain your own units. We're seeing an increase in our senior population right now, which is so sad because they've worked all these years and now they're retired, but their income is so fixed. and with no rent control, their rents go up and they end up in their cars. And so, their Social Security is like $1,200 a month. How do you live on that? So I think the first and biggest problem that we have is lack of affordable housing, and just the economy to live in Southern California. It's so expensive to live here. And then you have individuals, everybody assumes everybody on the streets has a substance abuse issue. Not everyone has a substance abuse issue. We do see a lot of it, but I would not say that is the main factor of why an individual is homeless. And then also, we have individuals that have mental health. But really, a lot of individuals that were living with families and then their parents passed away and that they just were left with nothing and then had to go to the streets. So everybody has their own story, and we've got over 600 homeless people in the city of Anaheim, and CityNet has to have 600 solutions because there is not a one solution for all of each individual that will fix this whole problem. We need to sit down, and every individual has their own story and their own, situation and their own path to take to accomplish and get into a permanent housing situation. So I wish there was a one-stop shop that we could just say, okay, this will fix everything.
Yeah.
But there isn't. There's so many, it's so multi-layered and faceted. And so we have to have multiple, different approaches to be able to serve every individual that we work with.
But it sounds like the county and the city of Anaheim is creating a lot of affordable housing options. I think I had heard about an econ lodge
Yes.
being turned into a
permanent supportive housing unit. Yes, so we were very fortunate in the city of Anaheim. They have their own housing authority, and they've been very proactive on creating senior living complexes and low-income housing units and permanent supportive housing buildings that individuals can apply for to get into. Unfortunately, the need is greater than the supply, and we're trying to catch up right now with that. And with different state funding coming down, hopefully we're going to see an increase of these housing opportunities coming into the county.
That's great. That's great.
I think they've done a great job. I think maybe it even, we can talk a little bit about the 260 street exits. I mean, that's a really great number, and that's something I think people have to understand, that this program is working and we're getting people off the streets. I think the first thing is to get them off the streets and get them into either shelter and or the services that are required. And then obviously, housing is extremely important at the back end. But first, we got to get them from the street into the shelters or the services that they may require and need. And then from there, obviously, the next component is definitely to get that housing and so forth. Getting 260 people street exits is tremendous in just in the first 3 months. So we're looking to make sure that this program continues to work. I think we have a great start.
That's awesome.
One of the great things too is, as I look at this, you're actually freeing up officers to go out and do what people expect police officers to be out there doing, right?
Yeah. That's like I said, that was one of the 3 components that when I pushed this out, this is the things that needed to happen, because just doing one was not going to be beneficial. There's really 3 components. It's our community, it's those individuals suffering, and it's the police department. And we wanted to make sure that the program touched on all 3. And I think this program is currently touching on all of those 3. Again, very early. We think we can even touch a little bit more. And as we progress, I think when we sit down, we collaborate and we see what's best for this community from our viewpoint, but also CCRT and through CityNet, because they have a viewpoint that looks at things differently and so forth. So just being open and collaborating and making sure that we provide those services.
And one of the things that people are going to ask, and I know you've had a creative solution to this, and that is, how are we going to pay for this?
Yeah, so we did. So when I started this off, I told them that I was going to get this done quick, and actually designing the program was pretty quick. It was then finding the money to be able to get this going. That took a little bit longer, but Sandra Lizzo from code enforcement, she was our partner from the get-go, and she reached out to housing, and we pitched the idea. The city, because of our size, does get some additional HUD funding. Usually, we only get maybe $100,000 to $200,000 a year. I think it's 160, but don't quote me on that. I can't remember the number. But this year, because of the pandemic, we received a few $1 million in that program, and so it fit all the criteria. It had to be homeless, So that's how we're starting this pilot program, is through that. Now, I'm going to speak for the police department. It's not our job to be involved in this. We believe that homelessness doesn't have borders. This is a county issue and should be addressed in a county format and not only in a community. We, being proactive, took the lead. And what I'm trying to say with that is that, during this pandemic period, a lot of good organizations have tried to survive, but great organizations like APD and the city of Anaheim, we try to learn from this. And so we took that step. And there are numerous cities that are watching what we're doing here today. They didn't want to take the step, right? To get off the ledge a little bit. And so we did. We wanted to learn from what we were seeing, and we wanted to try and experience and be innovative in how we address this issue. And I don't think it's I think it's the right time, I should say. It's the right time for us to try to address those individuals who are being impacted in my community that also gets that quality life impact at times. So I applaud CityNet, the city, for being open to the idea and reaching out there where nobody else in this county has reached out to this day. And I think there's a lot of great people who want to do things. We were just proactive instead of reactive.
Well, if there's one thing we've learned during the pandemic, it's how to pivot, and how to change direction. And it's a risk, and especially when you're risk averse, like police organizations are, to go out and try something new and innovative, and not only, taking a different approach, but internally, I know myself as a cop, I figure that I can do anything. Give me an assignment and I will go out and do this. But I don't have any experience in social work. I don't have any mental health experience. I'm going back a long time ago. I mean, having to deal with mental health issues in the field, and I'm 23 years old, and all I've ever studied is criminal justice, and people are asking me, help this person and fix them. And we didn't have access to the services that we do now. But it's a great collaborative. It's a great partnership. And I think we're going to see some amazing things as time goes on here. What is success going to look like for both of your organizations?
Well, for us, I mean, the more clients that we can get off of the streets, that's going to really dictate, some of our success. And also just getting those clients not only to the shelters, but getting them into that long-term housing. So, we are really looking forward to the numbers, decreasing in the city. And since we started in the city in 2014, I think the numbers were over 900 homeless. In the last years, we've gotten it under 600, I think. Don't quote me, I don't know those numbers off the top of my head, but I can get them for you. But we've really, made an impact in the services by the city being so proactive. So really just seeing those numbers decrease and having an option for every individual who is experiencing homelessness. That's really what the goal is to be able to, get to that functional zero where we've created enough resources in the system to be able to get clients to a resource and in their homelessness as fast as possible, if that's the journey they would like to take.
Yeah, and this is a collaborative effort amongst a number of organizations, not just the police department, CityNet, but there's all sorts of community groups that you work with as well, too, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely, yes. We have lots of partners that we work with, from the other shelter providers like Salvation Army and the Illumination Foundation, to the county's, Bridges at Kramer Shelter. Within our own organization, with this program, we've expanded into a very robust multidisciplinary team where we have, clinicians on our team, an LCSW, an EMT, LVN. And so we want to be able to address anything that's happening with that homeless individual when we're out on the street. So having this multidisciplinary approach to be able to provide these types of services, if it's from, medical care to a mental health, situation occurring that we need to have a clinician out to evaluate and determine if this individual needs to be linked to an emergency resource at that moment, to the individuals that are staff, that are case managers that have years of street experience working with the population and are able to build that rapport and trust with those clients to work with them on that long-term plan to housing.
Chief, any final words?
No, so I think I've already talked about how this program will be successful, at least for my eyes. Obviously, I'll add that CityNet's success will also be our success. So we definitely want CityNet to accomplish their goals that they have put forward. I think at the end of the day, as I've spoken before, I think it's extremely important for those individuals who are unfortunately down on their luck with homelessness, that they get those services as quickly as possible. Our community also has been impacted by some, not all. And we want to make sure their quality of life is also more beneficial for them, and hopefully by having this program, it does benefit them. And at the end of the day, the police department is here to provide a safe environment for everybody to live, work, and play. And so that's really the goal, is to make sure that we can accomplish that. That's our mission, is to create a safe environment for everybody to live, work, and play. And I think this program adds to that and benefits our community. So I think it's going to work.
Well, the other part of it too is that patience is a requirement, because we said about this is not an instant gratification where you can go out and within hours take a person off the streets. It's relationship building. It does take time, but it's worth it. It's worth it not to get the repeat calls on the mentally ill person walking down the street screaming at their head off, talking to themselves, and to take the senior citizen living in their car, and putting them in a place where that they're safe and they're comfortable. That's just human compassion. And that's what we have to remember in all of this too, is that we have to have compassion for some of these people, and that the humane thing to do, rather than just displacing them and kicking them off your corner and sending them to become somebody else's problem, which quite frankly, that was the typical police response. Get out of here, go someplace else. And if you go to another city, that's even better. So I don't have to go out on you, but it doesn't solve anything. But I'd like to thank both of you, and you know what? I hope there is tremendous success, and that it is something that is repeated by other agencies, because I think, together we're better. And if other agencies and other cities, take this approach, we may see more success around the county, rather than just little battles. We win the big ones as well.
Maybe you can share a little bit about how people can find you, where, even I'm curious, like seniors, they're not all of them are tech savvy. Like, how do they find you? Like, just how to...
Yeah, the other great part about this new expanded program in the city of Anaheim is that we were able to have a dispatch team that is answering the phones 7 days a week, 14 hours a day. So those individuals that aren't tech savvy and that don't have a phone, that can't leave a message, we're able to answer those phone calls live and dispatch a team and get to those individuals. So anyone looking for services can call our outreach line at 714-820-9090. And a live person will answer the phone and get a team connected to you as fast as possible.
Okay. And as always, there's a business line at the Anaheim Police Department that gets you there as well. Anyway, thank you for joining us at Behind the Badge, where we try to bring you informative news that's helpful to you about what's happening in police work. Signing off, Cindy and Joe.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you,
for
guys.
being here.
Thank you.